Here we are, as you can see, we have now landed at Neil Cole's Museum of Classic Science Fiction. So, follow me and I'll show you the entrance. This here is the entrance to the museum with the Dalek outside, and just inside is where you pay to gain entry. So I'll just pay pennies and we'll get going. This one here is quite an interesting product because, as you can see from the design, it looks very much like an Ice Warrior, and that's because it sort of is. Because this was made during the time where Doctor Who was no longer on TV, and there was a lot of things with licenses where people were trying to get away with making films if they didn't necessarily have permission. And so there was a fan film company that wanted to try and make an episode with some Ice Warriors, but legally they couldn't call them that, and so they redesigned them. So as you can see, the pincers are slightly different, the breastplate is slightly higher, and this is the Ice Lord, and so it looks a bit more authoritative. And the company called them Frost Lords and Frost Warriors, not Ice Warriors, to get around. So visually and name-wise they were different, but unfortunately this film never came to be because while they were preparing, the scripts were written, the props were made, the locations were ready, and then unfortunately there was a fire on location and all of the buildings were lost, and they didn't have enough money to then remake it, and so they still had scripts, still had costumes, still had everything, but without the location they couldn't do it. And so this is a little weird bit of history of an Ice Warrior that isn't an Ice Warrior that never got made. Have two costumes from Planet of the Apes. Here we have the Gorilla Soldier from the original 1970s version, and then here is the Chimp Warrior from the Planet of the Apes 2001 film. You can see also the gun and a few other little bits of devices and earpiece down there you can see, but these two standing next to each other are very imposing, and you can also see the difference in the makeup and how as the prosthesis evolved over the times, that the original Gorilla Warrior looks very impressive and very intimidating, yet you move to the Chimp Warrior and you see so many improvements with the wrinkles, the shape of the nose, the way it looks like it is a real life creature, whereas the other one is very impressive, but you can tell it isn't real. But these are the Planet of the Apes, and you can also see the difference in the costumes. One of them is quite more simple fabric, whereas the 2001 version has armour plating and a lot of extra added pieces to make it look more like a person in warrior's costume as opposed to a gorilla who's learned how to make clothes. So here we have a section all about Alien and the xenomorphs, and we've got a nice bit of history. Hello there. A nice bit of history where you get to see there's the engineer from Prometheus about creating the Alien prequel. We've got one of the alien eggs here. There's the foot from the Predator, which is from the film Alien vs Predator, and several other bits and pieces. And up here you've got bits where the skull is being made, and so you can see the faceplate's incomplete. And there's lots of little bits and pieces about Alien and aliens, including the odd bit of Predator. And we have over here some costumes. There's from the original Dune back in 2000. We also have here Starship Troopers. This is one of the trooper armour, complete with battle damage. And we've got some artwork down here, including a gauntlet. And we have the oldest piece in the entire museum, which, even though on the plaque it says it is from 1940, there is evidence of it being in a film from 1938. This was before the plume had been put on top, but this is the single oldest piece of recognisable prop work. That's this particular piece was a helmet used in the 1940 version of Flash Gordon, but it was also used prior to this. And also at the back we have a guard from Buck Rogers in the 25th century. And here in the museum is quite an interesting bit, because it's an entire Star Trek section, which, given how expensive Star Trek props usually are, being able to get his hands on these, Neil Cole's been very lucky. And so we've got a bit of Locutus of Borg, we've got a Romulan disruptor, some communicators and bits of makeup, the L cars from the actual starships that you can press the buttons, and here's another Aliens control panel, which up close looks like it's very cheaply put together, but it was, but on the screen you couldn't see that. And you've got bits of Klingon makeup you'd have stuck on, and Ferengi, and a Tribble down here, and it's very interesting, the history of what the costumes were, where they came from, how they came to be, and the fact that they have survived to this day, that you can look at some of these latex pieces, and whereas with something else like a Sea Devil or a Hemivore or one of those where the latex is disintegrated, you can see the latex here has survived a lot longer and a lot more intact.
Can't do that. Freak her out. Yeah.
And here we have the entrance to the Doctor Who section, as you can see here from this lovely TARDIS we'll be going through in a moment. But here we have a little bit of Ice Warrior, because it, again, made out of the same latex material, it's disintegrated over time, and so there's one section here which is surviving to this day. And we've also got this spike from Evil of the Daleks, which very nearly landed on Jamie. And so we've got a few bits here. And then if we now turn to the TARDIS, we will open. We've got several models that Neil has made himself, and we've got, as you can see, displays from Day of the Daleks, the Three Doctors, the Demons, several others dotted around the place. But here we have the head of the Exelon, which of course goes from death to the Daleks. And we have, there's the helmet from the mutants, some feet, and there's so many, I can't go through all of them, but you can just look around and see there's so many pieces of Doctor Who history and memorabilia and things that would have been lost to time because the BBC were renowned for, once they were finished with it, just throw it in a skip or bin it or something. And we have up here the feet of the Silurians, which these are surviving. Again, as you can see, the latex has disintegrated, as you can see by the hole in the foot, just about here. But that is the surviving foot, or feet rather, of the Silurians that otherwise that have been lost to time, and you can see cracking, and Neil is very good at preserving and protecting them, and has managed to maintain them in such a state that it's a recognisable foot, not just a mouldy lump of latex. Here the head of a mummy from the Pyramids of Mars. I nearly forgot its name. And here we have a mandrill from Nightmare of Eden, and it's very good that this is surviving, because you can see it's a very unique piece, having bits of latex mixed in with fur, and being so bulky it would usually just be thrown away, but they managed to save it. And we've got at the back here there's some Time Lord robes, and there we've got the Sisterhood of Khan. And we've got a few other pieces, like the mask here is from the creature from the pit, which I believe was made out of a standard hockey mask and was then painted. I might be incorrect, but we've got several other pieces as well from Nightmare of Eden. At the back here you can see one of the sparkly tunics. And here we have from Horns of Naimon, they've got the armour. And down here we have K9, which is one of the very few props in the museum which isn't an original, but it's taken from the original measurements, and it was donated to the museum. So rather than not accepting something just because it wasn't original, this has been included in amongst all the other original props and costumes. And you can see we have things from the Keeper of Traken, Meglos, the State of Decay, Leisure Hive, and there's so many bits and pieces and so many treasures that some of the costumes could have been recycled for other things or other productions in the BBC, but others which are so blatantly alien would have just been lost to time, and here they are, safe and sound, in Neil Cole's collection. very interesting cabinet here because there's just here this helmet, which you may recognise because this one guard helmet was recycled so many times in Doctor Who. It first appeared in Earthshock with the 5th Doctor, and then it reappeared with the 6th Doctor in the episode Mind Warp, and then again it appeared with the 7th Doctor in Delta and the Bannerman, and then its last appearance was in Red Dwarf in 1999 after Doctor Who had finished, and it's been recycled so many times. It's a very iconic looking helmet because they would have this and they just repaint it and use it again and again and again, and it's something that a lot of fans have picked up on, and here is one of those helmets that's been resprayed and used for someone else and then resprayed again and used for something else. And so if this hadn't come into the museum, I'm sure it would have still been resprayed and used for something yet again. We've also got some guns here, we have boats, you can see there is a breastplate there. We've got some nice looking feet, which are, as you can see the shoe part where the latex has been stuck on. We have the puppet from Snake Dance, and we've got so many wonderful pieces of the 5th Doctor's era here. We're having this is the gun from Earthshock itself, and there's the concept art for the very famous artwork of Anthony Ainley. And we've got the android, I beg your pardon, the Adric space boot, which you can see there, which looks almost like that of the Cyberman or a Sontaran, but it wasn't. It was specifically from Fort Doomsday. And then on the other side we have a lot of other costumes here, more indicative of the 4th Doctor's era, because we've got the Pluto guard, we have the shield gun, we've got several things at the back as well, like the Outlander's cloak from Gallifrey, some artwork of the White Guardian, including even some other things like a foot from the Rebos operation. And
the Museum of Classic Science Fiction will form the center of Dalek operations. Slave workers will be appropriated from the Allendale Co-op.
Isn't it nice to hear from our glorious leader Davros again? But in the corner as well we have one of the guards from the Pirate Planet, which is a very interesting little bit of kit, which looks very much like a piece you would expect to see more from Blake 7, which of course you did see in Blake 7 in the episode Warlord, but it first made its appearance in the Pirate Planet. It's why you can see that the shoulders in the photo on the little display piece and the actual armour are slightly different, because this one has slightly more on its shoulders but this one doesn't. That's because it was removed for Blake 7. Have over here the Garm, which as you can see has been nicely preserved, very imposing figure. And here we have the Mestor, which you can see also the mould for the head just there, and there's the finished face, so you can see the difference between them and how well made they are. Scout here, next to the Cryon, just here. But the Cyber Scout's very interesting because they were actually 2 Earthshock models that were repurposed for the Scout, and both of them were sprayed black, and then one of them was detonated, and that's how you see when the Cyberman dies, that's actually another version. So there's one version which is the Cyber Scout, and another version which is just another Earthshock resprayed black. And we also have the head of Syl, and the buggy badge down here with a couple other details such as hands, and the costume of the Governor from Vengeance on Varos. And at the back here, a little bit of Doctor Who trivia, having the actor who played Avon in Blake 7, who also appeared in Doctor Who in the episode Time Lash, and that is his costume from that story, from Paul Darrow's crossover into Doctor Who, even though he wasn't playing Avon. And on this side here we have, do I even need to introduce the Dalek? This one is not a screen used model, however it was taken from an original mould by the BBC for display purposes, and so it is as close as you can get to an original, because even though it wasn't used on screen, it was made by the BBC to go with the other screen used Daleks. It was just to bulk out the army, so even though it's not screen used, it's just as good. And then behind it there is another piece of crumbling latex, as you can see, which is currently, I believe, in the process of being repaired and restored. Also have just down here, as you can see, the little Tyrannosaurus Rex baby that is actually kept in the jar from the episode Mark of the Rani. It's in the Rani's TARDIS in the background, you can just see it. And then up here we have from Revelation of the Daleks, we have the uniform with the breathing apparatus, and then on the other side of the Dalek we have from Resurrection of the Daleks, we have the trooper that walked around with the serving the Daleks, and at the very back we have another piece from Resurrection of the Daleks, which is the maintenance crew member uniform. We also have the cap down here, worn by a couple of the characters. And just here we have the costume that was used in Earthshock and the Five Doctors of the Cyberman. That you can just make out here the flight suit, the way that it curves up and round, and it's been displayed on its side so you can see all of the fine details, because the actual suits for the Cybermen were real flight suits, the pressure suits to stop pilots from blacking out, that they bought them because they had lots of very nice wires, but of course a flight suit would have fabric over the top to hide the wires, and so the BBC bought a load of these flight suits, ripped off the external fabric so you can see all of the wires and make it look more like it has been, it's a machine, not a man in a suit. And here we have three costumes from Terror of the Vervoids. We have here the Megorian, as you can see, very well maintained with their very intimidating mask. We have also the Hyperion 3 duty uniform, which is just here with the nice belt piece still intact to this day, and we have the Hyperion 3 Guard. So the difference between the uniforms, but still with here the gun intact on the holster, with the padded shoulders and the ear defenders on the helmet. We also have to the side here the Time Lord collar, which is not the full dress uniform, but it was used in the Trial of a Time Lord, and then underneath is from the Mysterious Planet. It is one of the Marb Station workers.
Let's go through the no entry door.
One of the displays, which is one of the cheetah people from Survival, which of course is a lot of fun, because one of the actresses who played one of the cheetahs was of course Lisa Bowman, who later became famous by becoming one of the Seventh Doctor's companions with Ace in the radio series. One of the few companions to be created in a book series, then moved into radio, and then moved back onto screen in about 2015, I think it was, and she is a very interesting companion who's appeared with multiple incarnations of the Doctor, but her first on-screen appearance in Doctor Who was in fact as one of the cheetah people. And here we have one of the very last surviving haemovores, because a lot of the original haemovores were destroyed in the sea because of the salt water that would eat the latex. And so as you can see, the latex arm, latex face with the neck coming down. Of course, they'd have other bits where, say, the costume is torn, so in other versions you could see like a bit of the chest or something like that, where you can see the haemivore skin, and this is one of the very few surviving ones that are still around today, because a lot of them have just perished over time. Speaking of haemovores, this is a very interesting piece. This is a concept for the haemovores that was never created, because when they came up with the idea for the haemovores, they made this bust as what they thought it could be like, and the BBC said this was too scary and it was far too intimidating for something as friendly as Doctor Who, and so they then redesigned it from this bust to the haemovore mannequin as seen earlier. But yes, this was the original concept, which I think is truly terrifying. Here we have several rather interesting items, but just down here there's one of the Tetrap miniatures, which used to hang upside down inside the Rani's TARDIS. That it was in Time of the Rani that they appeared, and it's rather interesting that they weren't full-scale models or full-scale props. That on the episode they looked very good and looked like they were just regular costumes standing, and then the camera had been turned upside down, and it turns out that no, it was actually a few miniatures that were hanging from the ceiling, which is rather interesting, as many fans theorised that they were just standard costumes of someone standing like this, and then they turned the camera upside down, and it wasn't that at all. It was these miniatures. There's also a few other things from the Seventh Doctor's era, such as the Happiness Patrol, and we have a robot clown from The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And it's rather interesting to see the way things have changed and evolved. There's a Dalek hemisphere, a mask, spacecraft. A lot of very interesting things, including the hand of a Tetrap. And over here we have Kane, which is a rather interesting prop, as it did cause quite a few complaints because it was so graphic as the skin melted, and this was one of the stages that showed him dying. And you can see the way the bones are coming through and the way the flesh is melting, and it had to go through stages of him normal, him with a bit of makeup, him with this, and then they went to the effect where you see his face melting. Fascinating, the Cybermen. Of all the history that they had, and they've ended up here in this museum. A lot of people don't know that the actual original Cybermen, the eyes were slightly wonky. So when you see a Cyberman with perfectly round eyes, you'll know it's a replica.
Hi there.
Hiya.
How are you doing?
Not too bad.
And this is Proton, the Zygon, who's on loan in another museum. Quite an interesting costume, as they were quite hard to get in and out of, and they always had to have a microphone right in the very top sucker, which meant if you look at some of the Zygons, it would look as though they would have a silver sucker when they didn't. It was just a microphone buried on the inside of the costume.
Well, actually, there is a tiny walk down there, so if you went through
Classic science fiction will form the center of Dalek operations. Slave workers will be appropriated from the Allendale Co-op.
Interrupted there by Davros himself, and I believe that we are now going to be taken prisoner and turned into slaves. So it's been a pleasure knowing you. As like this is, they're all crammed in together.
Is this Johnny?
Is it Johnny Who?
Yes, it is indeed. I just remembered it's out of context, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all part of the group.
Yeah, I've seen you. I watch your films.
Yeah.
Hey, that's amazing. That you lot are here.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
This is our 6th Doctor. I'm Dr. Matthews.
Yes.
You're one of our Daleks.
I'm one of our Daleks and prop maker because I've got all the moulds for the Daleks and everything.
Yeah, wow, that's fun, brilliant.
Yeah,
thanks for coming.
And 3D printing I'm into, so I'll make some of the props.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm doing now upstairs, I've got obviously I just do originals because of space.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the K9's a replica, but that was donated, and I put him in simply because he was basically it was at this planet Earth, it was accurate. But bottom line was somebody gave me it, and I just thought, well, for the general public, people do like to see K9.
Yeah.
But apart from that, everything else is original. But then
And I like it because you've got a bit of everything as well. You've got the Doctor Who fans, but you've got the Tron bit I love. The Planet of the Apes I like. You've got.
Well, to be honest with you, because of the BBC copyright, I was terrified of opening just Doctor Who. And in reality, I'd have loved to have spread the whole lot as just Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But there's no way copyright. I'd have got shut. You know.
Yeah.
So that's why it became science fiction. And then actually, it's probably made it more successful generally because it is back. It's got like the Avengers stuff, a bit of Marvel in, which is good. And I love my second favourite show is the Outer Limits, the original. Unfortunately, there's very little surviving from it. But it's been a chance to get all that rich stuff in, and I think it makes it for the public better. And it's easier for me. I don't have to worry about offending the BBC, because they are funny buggers.
Yeah, this is it.
I mean, the Doctor Who magazine. I know the editor, and he's been lovely. And he's had me in obviously a couple of times, and I got the. I don't know if you saw that article I wrote about the Keys and Baroness that was in. Well, that was a couple of issues ago. Anyway, I've had these lovely photos from episode 4, Snows of Terror, and they've never been seen. There was no photograph surviving behind the scenes of it. And this guy who'd worked on it knew the Mag Museum, and he just said, "I want to donate these photos. Would you be interested?" I went, "Yes." Hello.
Your mate's lost a magazine out of one of his guns, a long black thing, but it's probably
For goodness
somewhere in the
sake.
village.
It's not down here.
Yeah, we haven't.
I better leave you to it again, guys.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just sit around the corner. I'm
Did you
finishing.
tell them about the Ice Warrior?
Yes.
Yes.
I made it up. It's not true. I've thrown you all off. It's not real. It's not any of that. No, it is. That is what it is. Yeah.
Just for you,
No, I'm finishing at 3, so if you want to.
I've got you a gift.
Wow. This is a little cast
That
from.
is a replica of the original.
Nice.
Because, like I said, how I'm family with John, we got the original.
Oh, it's so
And-
nice.
But because John kept his from Web of Fear.
Yeah.
But then he sold it so he could afford something.
Oh.
But while he had it, we got a copy of it.
Oh, it's lovely. Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind. But basically, what's going to go in there next is the 60s stuff, as I say. Peter Jackson just buys the lot, and Alex Franchione, who's just got loads of money in London, and they just buy stuff and hoard it.
Yeah, this is the trouble.
Exactly.
People got the money, they just got it and they just store it away.
I used to go to Blackpool. Yeah.
The Who shop have got Julian Glover's robes from the Crusade.
No. Yes.
But
I remember
because
that
it was BBC
I remember.
it was like they used to hire them in, so it wasn't made for that story, and they just
It's about.
Hello, Johnny Baines Entertainment. We are in the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi in Northumberland. Somewhere so up north, nobody actually knows where it is, including me, and I'm stuck here and I can never leave. It's like the Twilight Zone. Anyway, right, this lovely creature here was made by Philip Robinson, very talented sculptor who's done a little bit of work on the new series on The Quiet. I don't know if I meant to say that, but anyway, he this was made for an early 2000s Doctor Who spin-off in the Wilderness years called Ragnarok, and it's one of those things I wish had been made, because about 3 Ice Warriors were made for the production, and I loved the storyline because it was the Ice Warriors land on sort of Viking Northumberland, which living up here would have been great, and it was going to be filmed in York, and this was called a Frost Lord, so this was the Ice Lord character, and Phil made about 3 costumes which were budgeted, but then the sets themselves were burnt down, and there was an arson incident, I think, and unfortunately, because it was a small budget, production, they just couldn't remount it. They couldn't afford to rehire everybody, from what I gather. I've got the scripts upstairs, and Phil pops in regularly, and I'm very pleased to have this here, and I love it. I did sell the Ice Warrior, and I'm a bit... I wish I'd kept the Ice Warrior as well now, because it was... Well, you just look... I'm sorry, I'm joking. Right now, so that's it. So that's the Ragnarok Ice Frost Lord. So that's point of interest. I quite like that. Yeah.
That's fine.
Oh, and I've put the ice. Sorry, put the ice next to one of Andrew Scaletta's paintings. And this was, you know, I think one of Andrew's more quicker paintings that he did for the Monster book. But I really like it because it links H.G. Wells, and in the Monster book, if you haven't got Doctor Who: The Monsters by Archie Scaletta and Adrian Rigglesford, sorry. Basically what you've got in there is Adrian's written this script which links H.G. Wells getting these spheres and seeing visions of the Ice Warriors on Mars, which was the inspiration for his story, so it's quite nice. Little link here. This is a little helmet here. This I love this. This was from Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, and it started its life in Errol Flynn's Adventures of Robin Hood, which was my dear departed mum's favourite film of all time. So it's like a medieval helmet, and then in about 1940, the production team, or a production team at the time, the wardrobe department at the studios, put this little top fan on, and it was used in Flash Gordon. And then apparently after that it was in the Three Stooges and things like Underwater Kingdom. And there was a couple of these made, and it's just lovely to have one in the museum. It's the oldest piece in the museum.
Very nice.
Moving over here. What we have here is a little bit of 1960s based material. Now my second favourite show next to Doctor Who is the Outer Limits. So I've got an original Outer Limits script from Specimen Unknown, and I look at Outer Limits stuff is very difficult to find because most of it really has rotted away. And Outer Limits, like Doctor Who, was known for its monsters, but unfortunately most of them have died, unfortunately. But what we do have is a background costume in here from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Now the head was made for me by one of my ex-pupils, a student called Dolly Hope, and she's made that out of silicone because she needed something for a final degree project. But the actual costume, and it's beautiful, she did a beautiful job, and it's lovely to have a bit of her contribution to the museum. But the costume itself is an original from 1970, and it's made of vinyl, and it was made for the background scenes where they had these huge trails on horseback of all the ape soldiers, and they needed zillions of these costumes. No CGI, of course, it was all in camera. So that's nice, and I'm very pleased that I managed to collect over about a year this costume from the Tim Burton movie. Tim Burton movie, probably the best looking apes there are. I think better than even the new film. I think Rick Baker's apes are just stunning, and I wish they'd done that with the new one, if I'm honest. But not maybe like a lot of Tim Burton films. I mean, I like Tim Burton, but I like him more as a designer than a narrative storyteller. But his actual ape costumes were fab, and they're beautiful. And just when you consider this was like a background soldier, and the amount of detail put into just that costume is just silly. So I love that. And I love the contrast between the two. So that's that. Still at the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi, further down the corridor of dreams. Well, my father passed away about 20 years ago, and I had him... no, I didn't. No, this is not my father. Sorry, this is one of the dead bodies from the door scene in Prometheus, which was where all the bodies were piled up. Prometheus, I've got a love-hate with Prometheus. I adore Aliens, probably, I think, my favourite sci-fi film. It's an unusual film. It's a different take on the original, but what's lovely is you can't doubt it looks incredible, and it's lovely to have this here. Up here is a very controversial object. I've just written the latest magazine. I do a magazine every 2 or 3 months for the museum, and I've just written a whole issue about this head up here. And this is a xenomorph head from Aliens. Caused a little bit of controversy because a couple of collectors in America were going, it's not real, it's a replica. The bottom line is I got it from somebody whose uncle worked on set and who worked himself on set, and who was given this, and a lot of research, and I've contacted people who worked on the movie, and what we believe it to be is a prototype head that was made for the shotgun, the pistol scene where Vasquez puts a boot on the head of the xenomorph and shoots it. It's got a blowhole out on the back where it's been punctured, and there's metal clips clipping the jaw on. People thought it was an alien warhead. It's not an alien warhead. Alien warheads are slightly more crude, and because they're a recast, and it's also got these clips on. And when we spoke to a couple of effects guys who actually made these at the time, they said, yeah, that's the telltale signs of that sort of head. And of course, the fact it came from somebody who got it from the time. So that's that. Of course, there's still a couple of people who don't believe that, but because it's not in the books and the magazines. But hey ho, this has come from direct from a guy who worked on Blade Runner and who worked in the film industry.
So what's the difference between a xenomorph, an alien, and aliens, and all that?
Do you know what? the xenomorph itself, I never even knew until I was quite old that they were called xenomorphs. I just called it the alien. But I think just the species is the xenomorph. I don't know if it gets called that in Alien. I've seen Alien countless times. But I think from Aliens, to me, it was when they were named xenomorph as a species. But somebody can maybe tell us here. Was it called a xenomorph in the original film? I don't know. That's a cap, came straight off Harry Dean Stanton's head. It was made in production, wasn't used on screen. Again, the chap he was on the side, the guy very kindly donated all this. It's his life collection, he's donated. And that's one of the items, and this came straight from Harry Dean Stanton and gave it to him. Wasn't on screen, but there was quite a few of those caps made, but that was one. It's got Harry's name inside. So it's quite special, because Alien's a very special film for me. Right, okay, let's have a look at Varga. Quite like Varga. Here we have Varga in his natural environment. No, we've got a lovely, lovely painting here, again from the Monsters book, from... I have a couple of top favourite Doctor Who artists, and Andrew's up there. Andrew Scaletta, I love Andrew's work. I grew up with his Target book covers. They were my favourite covers, I love them. And I've loved his work ever since. And Andrew, very kindly, got this from Andrew direct. It's got some beautiful gold paint detailings which you can't see in the text, but it's a Varga. And what you'll see is, I then managed to acquire from a restoration of the Varga Ice Warrior that's now on display. This section came off one of the rear legs, and so I thought, right, okay, so this is an original section of Ice Warrior costume, so I thought the best way to present this, shut up, the best way to present this is to hover it above the actual painting. I thought that was a nice way of just showing it. So there you go, so it's quite a special little display that. It's a surviving piece of Ice Warrior. Again, very important to remember, the things in the museum, when you see a chunk of costume, you might think, oh, have you savaged that costume? No, this was... That rubber will not bend anymore, so when it came off, to put it, it's like the same with the pterodactyl that I restored. There was bits which once they'd come off, they'd hardened, and you cannot fold them and put them back on. I mean, you can put them in hot water, you can do all those tricks. Some bits are just going to crack, and and that was such a piece, and that's why it's away from the original costume. It's not that it was like, oh, someone's just trying to pull them off to flog or anything daft like that. No, just there's always casualties with these old rubber costumes, and that's one example. So bless you. So that's what that is. And we've got here as well, we've got Christopher Barry's wartime RAF jacket, and this whole display here I'm going to make as a little sort of tribute area for Christopher Barry. And we've got one of the tripods costumes next door, so that's what's going to come in. In here what we've got, I'll just give you an overview of this. This is the little Marvel collection. I grew up loving Marvel. I mean, I learned to read with Marvel comics. I've never been a massive book reader. I was just a comic reader. So Marvel was really important. So when they started making these films, I was blown away. And I think obviously a lot of new people came to Marvel as a result of the films. But for old fogies like in the 50s, like me, to see characters on screen that I never thought I'd see. I'm not so interested in the new characters particularly. It's those old classics that was just fantastic. Things like the Vision, Black Panther, to see those characters become real. So we've got some nice, again, Marvel, a lot of interest in Marvel, so it's quite difficult to, it's hard to get the stuff. You've got to really fight for it. So I'm quite pleased that people can come here and see it at all times. A couple of my favourite items in here, if I'm honest, right, I'm going to tell you, I love this missile core. This was one of the core, this was the core pulled out by Robert Downey Jr. when he's in the cave, he's opening a missile, he pulls it out and he throws it over his shoulder. That's that missile core there. And then this was a really nice, this is a Michael Chiklis hero head, and it's on a live cast of Michael Chiklis as the thing. It's got his teeth, and what I did with that was I sculpted the nose bridge, which is not quite accurate, and the eyes. I put the eyes in and around the eyelids, and basically that's the handy thing about being able to sculpt a little bit. I can repair these things hopefully to a good level. The problem was if I pull that nose up, it's about a 5-part prosthetic. If I pulled the nose up over about a year or two, it would have stretched and tore. So you want everything relaxed and not stressed. So that's what that is. That's a Kelsey Grammer mask, but again, it doesn't look like the beast on screen because it was put on the studio on just a generic face cast, as opposed to a live cast of Kelsey Grammer, which is a shame because if it just had he's got a bigger jaw. It just had that extra, it would have looked more like the actual character. Other interesting things in here. I love this. Thunderbirds, right? I mean, I love Jerry Anderson. It was never my number one love, but I do very fond of the stuff. And this is a chair from the film. The film itself gets a lot of flack, probably deservedly, to be honest. But the props are stunning, and I had to drive to London to get that. And then another ex-pupil of mine came and helped and wired it up. A guy called Jethro. Great friend of the museum, and he's a professor now, I think, of electronics and quantum realm or something. And basically, I call him either Tony Stark or Hydro Man, you know. And anyway, he came and put a little computer in, and you know, it was all old school electronics. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't LEDs or anything. And it's a lovely piece. It's a sort of huge piece that you really need a museum to put in because it's so big. We had to disassemble it to get it through in here, and it was quite a thing to do. And again, we've got the tripod's costume, we've got Will's tripod costume. The nice thing about that was when I got it, I just thought it was a generic, you know, City of Gold suit, and instead it was actually Thingy Shackley, what do you call him, John Shackley's costume. So I was really chuffed to get that. And I'm very, very pleased to have some Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff, which I know is a more of a, there's some lead character costumes there, and again, I love the fact it's Madame Hydra, because I used to read that in the comics, you know, she's a character from the 60s, and Jimmy Steranko character, and just love having those costumes in there as well. Again, the thing with a museum like this is having this range in, is that it'll touch different people in different ways, and that's the important thing. You know, somebody will come in, I get people in who are maybe a bit younger now, come in and watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and go, wow, it's Agent May's costume. And that's really nice. And I get people my age generally coming in and going, wow, that's a mummy head off Purim as well. And it's just offering that range of connections with people, which is lovely. So yeah, and I think just looking back, we probably need to mention Darth Vader, which is a recent acquisition. This has been donated by John Bullock, who again was the guy who worked on and off in films with his uncle, who was a known effects artist. This belonged to Bob Anderson. The head itself was used for the DK photo shoot. I'm just thrilled to have it. It's an amazing piece. It's huge, and we think this was his promotional. Pretty certain this is a promotional costume. It came straight from Bob Anderson's estate, and we don't think. Somebody's contacted me saying it could have been screen used because it's got this massive helmet. It's really big. He's got a big helmet, folks, and basically, because apparently they used oversized helmets to make the silhouette look more fierce. But anyway, so delighted to have that in the museum. Let's go to the Doctor Who section. Right, okay, one of my earliest props I ever got, and my favourite, probably one of my favourite props from my favourite story in Doctor Who, and that is the Galsec rifle, and that was from Sontaran Experiment, which is my absolute favourite story. And as such, I sculpted that little Steyr some years ago, many years ago. And again, I was lucky enough to get a page from Andrew Scaletta from the Monsters book with Steyr on, but I love Field Major Steyr. For me, the first two Sontarans have never been bettered on screen. I still think, and not just that, it's the characterisation. They're played straight and serious, and I think they've been sort of become comic foil, and that shouldn't be. They're like Doctor Who's Klingons, and they need to be taken seriously. And once you take the mick out of them, they're so easy to take the mick out of with their daft. You know, they look comical, or they can be very threatening, and I think you've got to play them dead straight. That's just, what do I know, writers? I don't know. Anyway, next one. This was quite a special head, because I'd seen this Exelon head for several years in Llangollen and then in Blackpool too. And I had no idea this was the Exelon head that was in Longleat for many, many years. And it was in the, and I just thought it was the aging rubber that discoloured it. It wasn't. It was in the Longleat fire when K9 went on fire.
Oh, I was there with the fire.
Yeah, and that discoloured the head. It was actually made by Mike Tucker, that head, and it was made for an 80s exhibition. And it's got Ronnie Barker's. It was cast inside the interior cast was Ronnie Barker, because he was in. Mike was clearing out the prop room, the mould room. And there was Ronnie Barker, so it's got Ronnie Barker's chin, and then he used the original Friedlander Exelon head, and it's probably the most seen Exelon mask in existence, because it was in Longleat and Blackpool, then in the newer versions, and it was on display, and there's loads of photos online where you'll see it in its cream colour, and it had lenses, and again the lenses melted. And so the original paint colour you can just see was behind the lenses, which is why, and I thought, should I repaint it and everything, but in a way it's got a history now for probably a good decade, 2 decades of that appearance. So I thought really that's now part of its story, so just leave it alone, do you know what I mean? So there you go. I'm trying to think, there's all sorts in here really. There's all sorts of Sea Devil, I mean I never thought I'd get Silurius.